The unshaken kindness. The golden hues of the setting sun painted the sky as Michael pulled into the quiet suburban gas station. The evening air carried a crisp breeze, offering a moment of relief after a long, grueling day at the garage. His body ached from hours of working under cars, but his mind was at ease. He had always loved his job, fixing things, bringing broken machines back to life. As he reached for the fuel pump, his sharp eyes caught sight of a distressed elderly woman standing beside a lopsided sedan. Her front tire had completely deflated, leaving her stranded at the station. She clutched her purse tightly, her wrinkled hands trembling with worry. Michael exhaled, rolling his shoulders. He had been looking forward to heading home, to a warm meal and a well-earned rest. But the sight of the elderly woman struggling with her predicament made his decision for him. Without hesitation, he set down the fuel nozzle, grabbed his toolkit from his motorcycle's saddlebag, and approached her with an easy smile. "Ma'am, looks like you've had a rough evening," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let me take care of that tire for you." The woman turned, her face lined with both relief and hesitation. "Oh, bless you, young man," she said, her voice frail yet filled with gratitude. "I had just picked up my grandson, but when I stopped here to grab a few things, I came back out to this. I don't even know how it happened. I don't think I hit anything." Michael nodded understandingly. "It happens sometimes, ma'am. Could be a slow leak, or maybe you ran over something without noticing. Either way, I'll have it fixed in no time." As he crouched down and got to work, the woman's grandson peeked out from the back seat, watching him curiously. The little boy, no older than 5 or 6, had big, bright eyes full of wonder. Michael gave him a small grin before focusing on the task at hand. Just as he was loosening the lug nuts, the distant growl of engines echoed through the gas station. Michael didn't need to look up to know trouble was brewing. The deep rumble of motorcycles grew louder, and within seconds, 3 large bikes roared into the station, pulling up near him and the elderly woman's car. The riders dismounted, their leather jackets adorned with patches and insignias that hinted at a biker gang affiliation. They were big, burly men with hardened faces, the kind that thrived on intimidation. Michael kept his focus on the tire, but he could feel their eyes on him. The tension in the air thickened as the trio stepped closer, their heavy boots crunching against the pavement. Well, what do we have here?" one of them sneered. His voice was sharp, mocking. Michael didn't respond immediately. He had dealt with men like this before, loud, aggressive, looking for an easy target. Experience had taught him that silence was sometimes the best weapon. "Hey, grease monkey," another one jeered. "What's a guy like you doing out here fixing tires for free? Ain't you got a job, or you just some roadside charity worker?" Michael exhaled slowly, keeping his cool. "Just helping someone in need. Nothing wrong with that." The leader of the group, a towering man with a thick beard and an intimidating presence, stepped closer, tilting his head as he studied Michael. His lips curled into a smirk. "That's real noble of you," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "But you see, we don't take too kindly to guys like you hanging around here. Maybe you should finish up and move along." Michael tightened his grip on the wrench, but his expression remained calm. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he also wasn't going to be pushed around. The elderly woman, sensing the hostility, clutched her grandson protectively. "Please," she said nervously, "he's just trying to help me." The bearded biker ignored her. He leaned in closer to Michael, his presence looming. "Tell you what, why don't you let us handle this? We'll take real good care of the lady's car." Michael finally stood up, locking eyes with the man. His voice was steady, unwavering. "I appreciate the offer, but I've got it under control." The biker's smirk faded. He clearly wasn't used to being defied so easily. His eyes darkened, and his 2 companions chuckled, sensing that things were about to escalate. "Listen, grease monkey," the second biker chimed in. We don't like your kind around here, acting all high and mighty like you belong." Michael remained still. He had faced prejudice before, but something about this encounter felt different. The bikers weren't just trying to humiliate him, they wanted a reaction, something they could use as an excuse to escalate things further. But Michael wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. The bikers exchanged glances, confused. "Who you calling, boy?" the bearded one asked, his tone shifting slightly. There was a hint of unease in his voice now. Michael didn't answer. He simply lifted the phone to his ear, his expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, he spoke. "Hey, it's me. I need you to come down to the gas station." "Yeah, bring everyone." The bikers stiffened. "Who the hell did you just call?" one of them snapped. Michael didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slipped his phone back into his pocket and turned his attention back to the car, casually tightening the last lug nut. "I just called some friends," he finally said, his voice even. "They'll be here any minute." The bikers exchanged uneasy looks. There was something about the way Michael spoke, calm, confident, unshaken, that made them reconsider their approach. Michael stood up straight, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked the bearded biker dead in the eyes. "You can stay if you want," he said simply. "But you might not like what happens next." For the first time, the bearded biker hesitated. His bravado wavered as uncertainty crept into his features. His two companions shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the entrance of the gas station as if expecting something, or someone, to appear. Michael didn't need to say anything else. The seed of doubt had been planted, and the bikers were no longer sure if they were in control of the situation. The gas station fell into a tense silence, broken only by the distant hum of approaching engines. And as the sound grew louder, the bikers' expressions changed from smug confidence to something much closer to fear, the turning tide. The hum of approaching engines grew louder, slicing through the tense silence like a knife. The three bikers, once so smug and sure of themselves, now glanced nervously toward the road leading into the gas station. Their aggressive postures slackened just a little, but their hands still hovered near their belts, just in case. Michael, still calm and composed, turned his gaze back to the elderly woman and her grandson. "Almost done here, ma'am," he said with a reassuring smile. He knelt beside the car and gave the tire one final check, making sure it was secured properly. The woman, still clutching her grandson protectively, whispered, "Young man, are you sure about this? I don't want you to get into trouble on my account." Michael gave her a nod, his confidence unwavering. "Don't worry, ma'am. You'll be on your way in just a minute." The leader of the bikers, a burly man with a thick beard and eyes like cold steel, forced a chuckle. "You expect us to be scared of some buddies of yours, grease monkey?" His voice was still filled with bravado, but Michael could hear the subtle waver underneath. Michael didn't respond. He didn't need to. A moment later, the first motorcycle appeared at the station entrance, its deep rumbling engine sending vibrations through the ground. Then came another. And another. Within seconds, a full procession of bikes rolled in, 15 motorcycles in total, each one sleek, powerful, and meticulously maintained. The riders were clad in matching jackets with bold insignias embroidered across the back, marking them as a part of a well-known riding club. The leader of the gang's face darkened. He recognized the emblem. Everybody in the city did. The riders pulled up in a coordinated formation, their engines roaring before one by one they shut them down. A single figure, lean but commanding, swung off his bike first. He removed his helmet, revealing sharp, calculating eyes and a face that held no trace of amusement. "Mike," the man called out, his voice steady and firm. "Everything all right?" Michael dusted off his hands, standing up to face his longtime friend, Andre "Dre" Lawson. Andre wasn't just anyone. He was the president of the Brotherhood Riders, a group of ex-military bikers and mechanics known for their fierce loyalty and strong sense of justice. Michael simply nodded. Just helping someone out. But these guys here, they seem to have a problem with me doing that. Andre's sharp eyes flickered toward the three bikers, who had now shifted uncomfortably in place. The rest of the Brotherhood Riders removed their helmets and stood beside their bikes, a silent but formidable wall of presence. One of the bikers, the shortest of the three, took a step back instinctively, his fingers twitching at his belt as if reconsidering his choices. The bearded leader squared his shoulders, trying to reclaim his dominance. "We were just having a conversation," he said, his voice now noticeably less sure. "Didn't mean anything by it." Andre took a slow step forward, placing himself between Michael and the bikers. His expression didn't change, but the weight of his presence alone was enough to suffocate any further attempts at bravado. "A conversation?" Andre repeated, tilting his head slightly. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my friend was minding his own business, helping a lady in need, when you three showed up trying to make it a problem." The leader clenched his jaw. He knew there was no easy way out of this. The Brotherhood Riders weren't just any motorcycle club, they had deep connections, strong alliances, and a reputation for never backing down. Michael crossed his arms, his voice level. "Now, if that was really just a friendly conversation, then you won't mind stepping back and letting me finish what I started, right?" For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The only sounds were the occasional hum of passing cars and the distant buzzing of a neon sign above the gas station. The second biker, the one who had been jeering the most earlier, cleared his throat. "We don't want no trouble," he muttered, glancing at his leader for guidance. The bearded biker exhaled sharply, eyes darting between Andre and the growing number of Brotherhood Riders. He finally seemed to grasp the reality of the situation. This was not a fight they could win. His ego clearly bruised, he threw his hands up in mock surrender. "Fine," he grumbled. "We were just leaving anyway." Michael didn't take his eyes off them as they backed away toward their bikes. The shortest one climbed on his first, eager to get out of there. The second followed, but the leader hesitated for a moment, locking eyes with Andre. "This ain't over," he muttered under his breath before straddling his bike. Andre smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, it's over. Unless you're dumb enough to make it worse for yourself." The bearded man scowled but said nothing more. With a rev of their engines, the three bikers sped off into the night, their earlier arrogance completely deflated. A few of the Brotherhood Riders chuckled, shaking their heads. "Cowards," one of them muttered. Andre turned back to Michael. "You good?" Michael nodded. "Yeah. Appreciate you coming out." Andre clapped him on the shoulder. "You know we always got your back." The elderly woman, who had been watching the entire ordeal with bated breath, let out a relieved sigh. "Thank you, all of you," she said, her eyes misty. "I don't know what I would have done if he hadn't been here." Michael smiled at her, giving the tire one final pat. "You're all set, ma'am. Good as new." She wiped at her eyes, smiling. "You're a good man, Michael." Michael simply shrugged. "Just doing what's right." The little boy, who had been quiet this whole time, suddenly beamed up at him. "You're like a superhero," he blurted out. Michael chuckled. "Nah, kid. Just a guy who knows how to fix things." As the woman got into her car, preparing to leave, Andre leaned in close. "Those guys are gonna stew on this for a while," he warned. "You think they'll let it go?" Michael's gaze drifted toward the road where the bikers had disappeared. "Doubt it," he admitted. "But I'm not worried. They picked the wrong guy to mess with." Andre grinned. "Damn right they did. With that, the Brotherhood riders mounted their bikes, one by one, their engines roaring to life. Michael watched as they filed out of the station, disappearing into the night like a silent force of justice. As he finally finished refueling and got back on his own motorcycle, he couldn't help but shake his head at how the night had turned out. Some people thrived on intimidation, thinking their size, numbers, or loud voices made them powerful. But true power? True power came from standing firm in the face of adversity. And if those bikers thought this was the end of it, they were in for a rude awakening. Because Michael wasn't just any mechanic. He was a man who never backed down, retaliation and resolve. The cool night air carried the scent of gasoline and asphalt as Michael rode through the quiet streets, his mind lingering on the encounter at the gas station. He wasn't worried about the three bikers themselves, they were all bark and little bite, but something told him this wasn't the last time he'd be seeing them. The Brotherhood riders had his back, no doubt about that. But Michael wasn't the kind of man who relied on others to fight his battles. He had dealt with bullies before, both in his childhood and throughout his years as a mechanic, and he had learned that people like that didn't take kindly to being humiliated. As he pulled into his driveway, he killed the engine and let out a long breath. His home was modest but well kept, a small, one-story house with a detached garage where he spent most of his time fixing up bikes and cars for friends and neighbors. He took pride in his work, and his reputation as a reliable and fair mechanic had earned him a lot of respect in the community. After locking up his bike, he stepped inside, kicked off his boots, and grabbed a cold beer from the fridge. Just as he settled onto the couch, his phone buzzed. It was Andre. "Yo," Michael answered, taking a sip of his drink. Andre's voice was serious. "You make it home all right?" Michael smirked. "Yeah, man. I'm good. You worried about me?" Andre let out a low chuckle. "Nah, not worried. But I know guys like those three. They got embarrassed tonight, and they ain't the type to let it go easy." Michael leaned back against the couch. "I figured as much. You think they'll come looking for trouble?" "Wouldn't be surprised," Andre replied. "They didn't recognize you, but I did some digging. They're part of a smaller gang called the Iron Fangs. Not big time, but they like to throw their weight around. Mostly small-time intimidation, some extortion. They're nothing compared to the Brotherhood, but they've got enough numbers to make themselves a nuisance." Michael sighed. He had been hoping the incident at the gas station would be the end of it, but deep down, he knew better. "You want backup?" Andre offered. "I can have a couple of the guys swing by your place, just in case." Michael appreciated the concern, but he shook his head. "Nah, I can handle myself. If they're dumb enough to come knocking, they'll find out real quick that I don't scare easy." Andre chuckled again. "That's what I thought you'd say. Just keep your eyes open, brother." Michael hung up and stared at the ceiling for a moment before taking another sip of his beer. He had spent years earning his respect in this town, and he wasn't about to let some wannabe tough guys ruin that. A warning in the dark. The next day, Michael was back at his garage, working on an old pickup truck when he noticed something strange. A black SUV had been parked across the street for nearly an hour, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. Michael wiped the grease off his hands and stepped outside, his expression calm but his body tense. He wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but after last night, he had a good feeling about who was watching him. As if on cue, the SUV's engine revved, and the vehicle pulled away, disappearing down the street. Michael exhaled slowly. It was a message, plain and simple. They were watching. Shaking his head, he went back to work, refusing to let them shake his focus. If they wanted to play games, they were in for a rude awakening. The break-in. That night, Michael was jolted awake by the sound of rustling outside. Years of working late nights in the garage had trained his ears to pick up even the slightest disturbances, and this was no raccoon in the trash. Moving silently, he grabbed the baseball bat he kept beside his bed and crept to the window. In the dim glow of the streetlights, he saw shadows moving near his garage. Michael's grip tightened on the bat as he moved to the back door. He wasn't the kind to scare easily, but he wasn't reckless either. If they were here to mess with his property, they were about to regret it. Taking a deep breath, he stepped outside. "Whatever you're trying to do, I'd think twice about it," he called out, his voice steady. The figures froze. Then, one of them stepped forward into the light. It was the bearded biker from the gas station. "Well, the man sneered. "Look who's still got that big mouth." Michael sighed. "You really came all the way out here just to get embarrassed again?" The biker scowled, his hand drifting toward his belt, where Michael could see the faint glint of a knife. "You think you're funny, huh?" Michael didn't move. "I think you're making a mistake." Two more figures stepped out of the shadows, his two buddies from the gas station. They were blocking the exit, trying to corner him. Michael wasn't worried. "See," the bearded biker continued, "you made us look bad in front of your little biker club. We don't take kindly to that." Michael tilted his head. "And what? You think breaking into my garage is gonna fix your bruised ego?" The second biker stepped forward. "Nah. But putting you in your place might." Michael sighed, shaking his head. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Before the bikers could react, he took a deliberate step forward, closing the distance between him and the leader. The bearded man flinched, clearly not expecting Michael to stand his ground. "You want a fight?" Michael asked, his voice low. "Then go ahead. But I promise you, it won't end the way you think it will." The leader hesitated. Michael wasn't the tallest guy, and he wasn't the bulkiest, but there was something in his eyes, something cold and unyielding, that made the bikers second-guess themselves. Then, in the distance, the unmistakable sound of approaching motorcycles rumbled through the air. The iron fangs stiffened. Michael smirked. "Did you forget where you are?" he asked. "This is my town." Headlights appeared at the end of the street, and within seconds, multiple bikes pulled up in front of Michael's house. The Brotherhood riders had arrived. Andre was at the front, stepping off his bike with a slow, deliberate motion. "Well, what do we have here?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. The bearded biker swallowed hard, his confidence visibly crumbling. Michael crossed his arms. "I told you. You picked the wrong guy to mess with." For a moment, the three bikers just stood there, their faces shifting between anger, embarrassment, and fear. Then, without another word, they turned and hurried off into the night, disappearing like the cowards they were. Michael watched them go before turning back to Andre. "Thanks for the backup," he said. Andre chuckled. "Didn't think you needed it. But hey, figured we'd make a statement." Michael smirked. Message received. As the Brotherhood riders revved their engines and took off down the street, Michael stood alone in the night, taking in the quiet once more. This wasn't over. But he was ready for whatever came next. Escalation and the unseen threat. The morning after the confrontation outside Michael's garage was eerily quiet. The usual sounds of the neighborhood, the distant hum of cars, the chatter of early risers heading to work, felt subdued, as if the tension from the night before still lingered in the air. Michael sat on the porch, sipping his coffee, his sharp eyes scanning the street. He knew the iron fangs wouldn't let this go. They had already shown they were willing to cross lines, and men like that didn't stop until they either got what they wanted, or were stopped for good. As he finished his coffee, his phone buzzed. It was Andre. "You see the news yet?" Andre's voice was gruff, straight to the point. Michael frowned. "No, what's up?" Andre exhaled sharply. "Meet me at the shop. Now." That was all Michael needed to hear. The message left behind. 15 minutes later, Michael pulled into Lawson's Auto, the shop Andre owned and where the Brotherhood riders often gathered. As he parked his bike, he noticed a group of his brothers standing near the back, their faces grim. Andre waved him over, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Look at this," he said, motioning toward the side of the building. Michael's jaw tightened as he saw the word spray-painted in thick red letters across the garage door. "Stay out of our business." Beneath the warning, a crude drawing of a snake wrapped around a motorcycle was scrawled in black, no doubt the Iron Fang's insignia. Michael took a slow breath, his hands clenching into fists. "This was last night?" he asked. Andre nodded. "Must have been after they ran off from your place. Guess they decided they couldn't get to you, so they wanted to send a message to all of us instead." Michael scoffed. "Cowards." "Yeah," Andre agreed. "But cowards can still be dangerous." One of the other Brotherhood riders, a tall man named Rico, stepped forward. "We checked the security footage. 3 of them. All wearing masks, but we know exactly who they are. We got their bikes on camera clear as day." Michael exhaled sharply. "We should call the cops." Andre shook his head. "The cops around here? They won't do a damn thing unless someone gets hurt. The Iron Fangs know that, which is why they think they can get away with this." Michael glanced back at the graffiti. It wasn't just a message, it was a challenge. "So, what's the move?" Rico asked. Michael took a long moment before answering. "They want us to back off. That's not gonna happen. But we're not gonna play their game either. We're smarter than them." Andre nodded approvingly. "I was hoping you'd say that." A plan in motion. Michael spent the rest of the day at the shop, helping Andre and the others clean up the graffiti and reinforce security. They installed extra cameras, updated the locks, and made sure every Brotherhood rider in town knew what had happened. By the evening, the message was clear. The Brotherhood wasn't backing down. But Michael knew it wasn't over. And he was right. The trap is set. That night, Michael parked his bike behind his house instead of in the driveway. He left his garage door slightly open, just enough to look like an opportunity for someone bold enough to take it. Then he waited. He wasn't just hoping the Iron Fangs would show up, he was counting on it. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The air was still, thick with the kind of silence that came before a storm. Then, just past 2 a.m., Michael heard it. The faint sound of footsteps in the gravel. His pulse remained steady as he reached for the baseball bat he had kept beside him. He moved silently, slipping through the back door of his house and into the shadows of the yard. A few seconds later, the garage door creaked open a little more. Michael crouched low, watching as a figure slipped inside. Then another. And another. 3 of them. Michael recognized their builds immediately, the bearded leader, the cocky second-in-command, and the twitchy third biker. The same 3 who had confronted him at the gas station and later at his home. This time, they had weapons. A crowbar. A wrench. A knife. Michael's eyes narrowed. These men weren't here to send a message anymore. They were here to destroy. Or worse. The tables turn. Michael stepped forward, letting his boots scrape against the gravel just enough to make a sound. The bikers froze. "You boys lost?" Michael's voice was low, controlled. The bearded leader spun around, his knife flashing in the dim light. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" Michael took another step closer. "No. I don't." The second biker sneered. "You think you're tough, 'cause you got your little club backing you up?" Michael tilted his head. "Who said I needed them for this?" Before they could react, a sudden flood of light illuminated the yard. And then the unmistakable sound of motorcycles roaring to life shattered the silence. The Iron Fangs turned toward the road just in time to see them. Andre, Rico, and half a dozen other Brotherhood riders, all lined up at the end of the street, their engines rumbling like an approaching storm. The Iron Fang's confidence shattered instantly. Michael smirked. "You really didn't think I'd be stupid enough to take you on alone, did you?" The bearded leader cursed under his breath, gripping his knife tighter. His eyes darted between Michael and the approaching riders, calculating his next move. Michael took another step forward, his voice calm but firm. "Drop the weapons." For a moment, no one moved. Then, Rico pulled something from his jacket, a sleek, black pistol. He didn't point it at anyone. He just held it. That was all it took. The twitchy third biker immediately dropped his crowbar with a loud clang. The second biker hesitated, then followed. Only the leader remained defiant, his fingers still wrapped around his knife. His nostrils flared as he glared at Michael. "You don't scare me," he growled. Michael stepped even closer, his eyes like steel. "Then you're dumber than I thought." The leader hesitated. His grip loosened. Then, finally, he let the knife clatter to the ground. Michael didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stepped back and let the moment sink in. "You lost," he said plainly. "And if you ever come near me, my garage, or my people again," he let the words hang in the air, letting the weight of unspoken consequences settle. The leader swallowed hard. Then, without another word, he turned and stalked away, his two companions scrambling after him. The Brotherhood riders watched them disappear into the night. Andre finally broke the silence. "Think they got the message this time?" Michael exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "They will. And if not," he glanced toward the road where the Iron Fangs had fled. "They'll wish they had." As the Brotherhood riders revved their engines, the night air buzzed with an unspoken truth. Michael wasn't just a mechanic. He was a man who stood his ground. And no one, no matter how big, how loud, or how dangerous, was going to change that. The Iron Fang strike back. For the next few days, things were quiet. Too quiet. Michael went about his usual routine, fixing bikes and cars, sharing laughs with the Brotherhood riders, and checking in on the elderly woman he had helped at the gas station. On the surface, life was back to normal. But he knew better. The Iron Fangs weren't the type to take a loss and walk away. They had been humiliated, and men like them didn't forget something like that. So Michael waited. He kept his guard up, his eyes sharp. He reinforced the locks on his shop, made sure the security cameras were running 24/7, and let the Brotherhood know to stay alert. Then, just as he suspected, the storm finally hit. The Brotherhood rider who never made it home. It happened on a Saturday night. Michael was finishing up at the shop when he got the call from Andre. His voice was tight, angry. "We got a problem." Michael's stomach clenched. "What happened?" "It's Rico." He was jumped. Michael's blood ran cold. "What? Where?" "Couple blocks from his place. He was heading home from the bar when they got him. Beat him pretty bad, slashed his tires, left him on the pavement." Michael grabbed his keys. "He all right?" "He'll live," Andre said, but his voice was grim. "But they sent a message." Michael knew what that meant. This wasn't just an attack. It was retaliation. He jumped on his bike and sped through the streets, his mind racing. Rico wasn't just some random member of the Brotherhood, he was family. And the Iron Fangs had crossed a line. The Brotherhood assembles. When Michael arrived at Andre's place, the entire Brotherhood was already gathered. Their faces were hard, their eyes cold. Rico sat on the porch with an ice pack pressed against his swollen jaw, his knuckles bruised from fighting back. Michael knelt beside him. "You good, man?" Rico managed a weak grin. "I've had worse. But those bastards are gonna pay for this." Andre stood nearby, arms crossed, his face dark with anger. This was a declaration of war. Michael took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay level-headed. "Did he see who did it?" Rico nodded. "Same three from the gas station. But there were more this time. Maybe 5 or 6 of them total." Michael clenched his jaw. The Iron Fangs weren't just out for revenge, they were trying to show strength. Trying to prove that they weren't the ones who had been beaten down. But they had made one mistake. They thought the Brotherhood riders would let this go. They thought wrong. A plan for justice. Michael looked around at his brothers. "We're not gonna let this slide. But we're not gonna be stupid about it, either." Andre nodded. "Agreed. We don't go picking a street fight. We hit M where it hurts." Michael glanced at Rico. "You remember where they jumped you?" Rico winced as he shifted in his chair. "Yeah. Near that abandoned warehouse by the train tracks." Michael exchanged a look with Andre. "That makes sense. It's isolated, no cameras, no witnesses." Andre smirked. "Then maybe it's time we pay M a visit." The Brotherhood murmured in agreement. Michael's voice was calm, measured. "We don't do this reckless. We do it smart. We find out exactly where they hang out, how many they got, and then we make sure they never pull something like this again." Andre grinned. "Now you're talking." The recon mission. That night, Michael and Andre rode out to the warehouse where Rico had been jumped. They kept their bikes quiet, parking a block away and moving on foot. The place was exactly what they expected, run down, covered in graffiti, and just secluded enough to be the perfect spot for illegal business. And the Iron Fangs were there. Michael counted at least 10 of them, sitting around drinking, laughing like they had already won the fight. Their leader, the bearded man from the gas station, was at the center, talking with a couple of new faces. Michael and Andre exchanged a glance. "This is their hideout," Andre murmured. "Or at least one of them." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then we know where to hit them." They stayed hidden, watching, gathering intel. The Iron Fangs had numbers, but they weren't disciplined. They were cocky, unorganized. And that was their weakness. After about an hour, Michael and Andre slipped away, their minds already working on the next step. The Brotherhood's move. Back at the shop, Michael laid out the plan. "We're not gonna fight them on their turf. We're gonna make them come to us." Andre nodded. "And when they do, we make sure they regret it." The Brotherhood had something the Iron Fangs didn't: organization, experience, and a network of people who had their backs. By the next day, the plan was set in motion. A few Brotherhood members spread the word that Michael was alone at the shop that night. Another group made sure the police would be looking the other way, nothing illegal, just enough distractions to make sure they wouldn't be around. And Michael? He made sure he was ready. The Iron Fangs take the bait. It didn't take long. Just after midnight, the sound of motorcycles filled the air. Michael stood outside his shop, waiting, his expression unreadable. The Iron Fangs rolled up in force, at least 12 of them this time. Their leader smirked as he stepped off his bike. "Didn't think we forgot about you, did you?" Michael exhaled. "I was counting on it." The bearded man sneered. "You think your little club can protect you forever?" Michael chuckled. "I don't need protection." Then, from the darkness, the roar of engines erupted. The Brotherhood riders came from both sides, surrounding the Iron Fangs in a perfect pincer formation. Andre stepped forward, his arms crossed. "Looks like you boys walked right into a bad situation." The Iron Fangs' cocky expressions faltered. They weren't the ones in control anymore. Michael stepped forward. Last chance. Walk away now, and this ends here. The bearded leader's face twisted with rage, but he wasn't stupid. He looked at the Brotherhood, at the way they stood together, strong and unwavering. Then, finally, he cursed under his breath and turned toward his bike. This ain't over. Michael smirked. It is for you. One by one, the Iron Fangs backed off, revving their engines and disappearing into the night. The Brotherhood had won. Again. The final warning. Andre turned to Michael. Think they'll be back? Michael watched the empty road for a moment before shaking his head. No. They finally got the message. And if they didn't? Well. Michael wasn't going anywhere. Because he wasn't just a mechanic. He was the kind of man who stood his ground. And in his town, that meant something.